Hello, friends. This is Mac Payne, founder, owner, and operator of the Vietnam Veteran News Podcast. One of the primary reasons I started this podcast 12 years ago, and since then has published 3,200 episodes, is to verify the fact that the Vietnam veteran generation is as great as any that ever heeded the call of duty from our country. Being a Vietnam veteran, I know how important it is for the country to know about these great individuals. The vast majority of these Vietnam veterans went over to Vietnam and served their country in a very difficult situation. And most of them did quite well. Matter of fact, 235 of those Vietnam veterans received the Congressional Medal of Honor for their service in country. I have highlighted every one of those individuals on this podcast. And I don't think it quite does it justice when you look at their stories, one podcast episode. So from time to time, I will do another podcast about them. The purpose of this video today is to let you know that on President's Day of 2026, I have published an episode on my podcast about one of those Medal of Honor recipients. His name is James H. Monroe. Since he shares the same name as one of our presidents, Tara Ross, who has a tremendous website called Tara Ross, where she writes about veterans. On President's Day of 2026, she published a story about James H. Monroe, the Vietnam veteran. In the podcast episode 3205, which is published on President's Day of 2026, in honor of both the Monroes, President Monroe and Medal of Honor recipient James Monroe from Aurora, Illinois, will be featured on the podcast episode. I highly encourage you to go over to the podcast website and listen to what Tara Ross has to say about this hero from the Vietnam War. I made it easy for you. All you've got to do is go down below this 1960s vintage Philco TV set and click on the link that will take you directly to the episode on the podcast website, VietnamVeteranNews.com. I highly encourage you to listen to that episode about this brave individual. James H. Monroe was a fine young man from Aurora, Illinois. He was going to college up there in Illinois, and he dropped out for a semester or two and immediately was drafted. But James Monroe did not run off to Canada. He served his country and went to Vietnam. He was assigned to 1st of the 8th Cav in the 1st Cav Division. Sadly, on February the 16th, 1967, he was in action near Bang Son, Vietnam, where I spent some time. And he died when he was protecting his fellow soldiers from a live hand grenade. It is a terrible thing that this fine young man had to leave this earth so soon in his life. There's no doubt in my mind he would have done great things in his life had he lived. I ask that you pay your respects to this brave individual by going over to the podcast website and listening to his story as told by Tara Ross on President's Day 2026. It would be a wonderful thing for you to do that and hear this story. This is Mac Payne closing out this video here. Thank you for listening as I talked about James H. Monroe, Vietnam War hero. Please go over to the podcast website and listen to the full episode about him. Thank you for listening. We'll talk soon.